third, you don't understand anything about my business. The IT consultant says, what do you mean? He says, well, you made the bet. You won the sheep. He says, but now I've won it back, right? Yes, that's correct. He says, so now can I have my dog back? Surprisingly, that has very little to do with the sermon. The point is, though, the shepherd knows the sheep. The shepherd knows them by name. Not just knows how many he's got, 1,586 sheep. But he also knows each one of them, each one of their characteristics. In fact, he knows which ones are going to be wandering off, which ones he has to keep an extra eye on, which ones he's going to have to keep bringing back. And unlike the hireling, even if they show up in a Porsche, he's going to take care of those sheep. The shepherd is also part owner. A hireling is not. Now let me ask you, if you own something, do you take better care of it? Are you more protective of it? If something happens, are you going to put yourself between it and you? Make sure that you have got a firm grasp on it? Of course you are. Now, if it doesn't belong to you, and somebody comes along who's bigger and stronger, are you going to stand up to them and make sure you protect your property? Maybe. Probably not. The way Jesus tells it is that the hired hand merely sees the wolf coming, runs off himself to protect himself, and leaves the sheep to fend for themselves, only to allow this wolf to come in and scatter the sheep and probably eat a few. All because that's what a hired hand might do. William Barclay, the great commentator, said this about this passage in the Gospel of John. He said, a real shepherd is born to the task. He's sent out with a flock as soon as he's old enough to go. The sheep become his friends. They become his companions. Why? Probably because they're one of the few things out there that he can talk to. Doesn't mean he's got a whole staff working under him. Even if he owns the flock, even if his dad owns the flock, they're it. You know, you've seen people talking to their cats. Jennifer's going, no. Or dogs. They become members of your family. Well, the sheep would become members of the shepherd's family. And he would talk to them. It became second nature to think of them before he thought of himself. But the false shepherd, the hireling, came into the job, not as a calling, but simply as a way of making money and providing for himself. He was in it simply and solely for the pay that he could get. He might even be a man who had taken to the hills because the town was too hot to hold him. He had no sense of the height and responsibility of the task. He was only a hireling. But that doesn't describe Jesus. Jesus, he says, is the good shepherd. I am, ego eimi, the good shepherd. In other words, as God, I am the good shepherd. I watch out over the flock. I know each one by name. Now, I can tell you, coming into a new congregation several years ago, it takes a few weeks to get to know all the names, even when they're not thousands of names to get to know. Now, can you imagine doing that not for this church, but for East 91st? Okay, now can you imagine doing that for, let's say, 10 East 91st? Or can you imagine coming into the situation already knowing all of the names? Can you imagine not just a few congregations, but every child, every person that walks the earth? Not only knows their name, but knows their needs, knows their wants, knows their desires, knows what they've done and what they haven't done. Knows everything there is to know about them even before they know it themselves. And imagine that same shepherd accepts you just the way you are. That's Jesus. That's the Good Shepherd. He knows we've got quirks. He knows we've got flaws. He knows we sin. He knows we've fallen short. And he doesn't say, as soon as you get your act together, then I'll love you. As soon as you do what's right, then I'll take you in as my own. Instead, he says, I love you as you are. Now, that doesn't mean he wants to leave us where we are, but it does mean he loves us where we are. And he doesn't want to leave us where we are because he knows that there's something much better for us. Now, usually I try not to embarrass anybody, but I want to see a show of hands this morning. How many of you think that's good news? That Jesus will accept us for who we are right now? Raise your hand. Okay, here's a hint. On Back to Church Sunday, when you go out to invite a friend, let them know you know somebody who will accept them for just who they are. Because I can tell you this, very often the excuse that you get is, well, when I get my act together, I'm coming back to church. When I put everything right in my life, I'm going to come back. See, that's backwards, isn't it? You don't get yourself together to come back to church. You come back to church to meet the Savior who's going to put you back together. And we've got that good news. We can share that good news with people. And that's simple. We don't have to tell them about all the programs. We don't have to tell them about all the things we do. We don't have to tell them of our sometimes insane love of food. We just have to tell them about a Savior who loves them as they are, who wants the very best for them, who wants them to become, not a Marine, but still somebody who can be all they can be. Or I guess that's Army, isn't it? Imagine that. The Good Shepherd knows his sheep. He cares for them individually. Shepherd probably had at that time maybe 100 sheep. And if he found even one of them missing, he would corral the others, make sure that they were safe, and then go off and find the one. Now that seems a bit risky, doesn't it? You're going to leave the 99 in order to go find the one. Why not just let the one go who's wandered off, because they're probably going to do it again, and care for the 99 that you've got? Well, because you're talking about a Savior who knows each one of those sheep and loves each one of those sheep intimately. He is the Word. In Greek, as they say, genosko, the Word. And that was not just a written word, something that was written down. It meant that that word was intimate. It was a connection. And he knew them. Now, to know can also have a very sexual connotation, that very intimacy. But that's the word that is used in this passage as well. To know. Not sexually, but intimately, and everything about them. And so you don't just abandon the one because they've wandered off. You go and seek them. And if you come back and another one's wandered off in the meantime, you go get them. And if you come back and another one's wandered off, you go get them. Seems like a lot of wasted energy, doesn't it? That's the God that we